Hey, is this thing on? Hello? Hit it again. I think it's on now. Welcome to Hiker Trash Radio, where each week, Doc will drag some colorful characters out of the woods to talk trail and Type 2 fun. If you're aspiring hiker trash, or if you're just looking to understand the hiker trash in your life, look no further. So lace up those boots, gnaw on some jerky, and settle into your 20-mile pace as we fire up the podcast from somewhere deep in the backcountry. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the trail, dirtbags, hiker trash, and of course, good smelling day hikers. I'm Doc, and this is Hiker Trash Radio. Hey, if you like what we're doing here, help us out. Take just a minute, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, help us move up the charts. And if you don't like what we're doing, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, let's get to this week's guest, a repeat customer and a fan favorite whom we interviewed last season as one of the quartet of hikers who successfully completed the calendar year Triple Crown. Welcome back to Hiker Trash Radio, Carl, Professor Stanfield. How's it going, Carl?
Woohoo, it's good to be here again, Doc.
And have we gone from professor to just a prof? Is that what it is now?
Yeah, I think so. That's what most people I'm close with call me. And I feel like after, I think this is my fourth time on here, I've met you in person. I think we're there now.
Think we're there. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, and did it end up just being a quartet? Did anybody sneak in under the wire that I'm unaware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but yeah, if they did, they've been really quiet about it. But yeah, as far as I know, it's the four of us from last year.
Okay. Now, remind our listeners about how you came by Professor or Prof as your trail name.
Yeah, I got Professor as a trail name on my very first through hike of the Appalachian Trail in 2018. I was out hiking. The very first couple of guys that I met while I was out there, it was day 5. I was coming into the shelter at the end of the day, and I'd been the logistics guy so far. I'd done a lot of homework, especially on the first several days and little stretches of the trail. So I always had a plan and was always talking about, well, if we do this many miles this day, we'll be here at this time and all of that. And so I got to the shelter first, and then a couple of my buddies caught up and said, hey, we figured out your trail name. We were just talking back there, and we were trying to figure out when we were going to get to this town and when we might take a zero. And then Phil here said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll just ask the professor when we catch him. And so then they caught me and they gave it to me, and then I've been stoked to have it ever since.
I like Prof because it is it's much shorter, not as many syllables. In case of a dangerous situation, you could be warned almost immediately. You'd be safe.
Yeah. I like keeping it short, keeping it simple.
Yeah. Now, last time you were on, we were the John freaking Muir Pod. Now we're Hiker Trash Radio. What do you think?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's more, I think, obvious what it's about. I think I definitely would have jumped into this a lot quicker as an aspiring through hiker. Especially someone that was doing hiking out east, looking into the Appalachian Trail was my first through hike. I didn't necessarily know as much about the affiliation with John Muir and all of that, but definitely would have gotten hiker trash pretty quickly on. So I think it's going to be great for bringing more people into the culture. Nice.
Thank you. Now, I said to ask you a technical question, get a little off track here, but as we went through the new intros with the new equipment that I'm using, did you hear anything on your end, or were you just sitting there in silence watching me?
I heard it on my end.
Okay. All right.
I heard all the intro stuff. Yeah.
I just want to make sure. I didn't want you to wonder what the heck's going on. What's he doing over there?
Yeah. So it was only a little bit awkward, not extremely awkward.
Yeah. Just a little bit. All right. Hey, with the Hiker Trash Radio rebranding, we've also rebranded some of our segments. So what you used to know as the Pro Tip Inside of the Week, that has now been rebranded to more hiking related kind of moniker. It is the Hiking Hack. Same kind of concept though, where I will turn to you towards the end of the episode and ask you to share some trail wisdom with our listeners to make their next extra outdoor experience even better. So it's now called the Hiking Hack.
Okay, cool. I'll be thinking about my hiking hack.
Okay.
Trailblazers Toolkit.
That's right. Another rebranded segment is the Trailblazers Toolkit, sponsored by the ultralight backpacking gear company 6 Moon Designs. You know, I love to talk about gear on the podcast, and I love to hear about the most important item in my guest's adventure gear. So, Prof, if you were preparing for your next adventure and I was the one providing you with all your gear, what is the one specific piece of gear you would insist on being packed? Give me all the specifics on that piece of gear. Tell me why you got to have it out there. This could be any type of item. It could be gear. It could be apparel. It could be a luxury item. So, Prof, what is that item in your toolkit?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of because I think I've done this once. And so I'm going to try to say something different than what I said the last time I did this with you. And I'm going to say I'm a big proponent of having a sleeping bag liner in all seasons, but especially in the summer season when it's especially hot. I think that it's great for keeping your sleeping bag or your quilt cleaner. I think that's the biggest appeal to it for me, of being especially dirty, hiking out west and being sweaty and caked in dirt, or hiking out east and being muddy, whatever it is. I love having that. And I like to take a silk one. Sea to Summit makes a good one that's about 4 ounces. And it's great for being on trail, not having to worry about getting my really nice, expensive quilt dirty. It lasts a lot longer when I'm just putting my dirty body into this little quilt. And then it's great, or into this liner. And then it's great in town also, of having a laundry bag, having just a bag you can carry around when you're like on a thru hike to walk around town with. And yeah, it's a luxury item, but I've found that it's totally worth it. I love having it out there.
Yeah, multi-purpose item, used as a laundry bag. Mm-hmm. And it also extends the useful life of the quilt or the sleeping bag that you're sleeping in.
Mm-hmm. Yep, all of that.
Nice. Now, I neglected to congratulate you. I've been following on social media. I know that your sister just got married. So congratulations on that. That looked like a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. That was a blast. And that's actually where I am right now. They got married about 3 weeks ago and had a delayed honeymoon. So they're on their honeymoon right now, and I'm house sitting. Nice. So it's one of the rare instances right now in my life that I have a home to myself for just a little bit.
Now, did you invite your entire family over there to party during your house sitting adventures?
Yeah, they're all too far away. They couldn't make it.
Nice. So where is your sister located?
Yeah, so I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee over here.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And where's the honeymoon?
They flew down to Miami to cruise to the Bahamas for the week.
Oh, that'll be nice.
Yeah. Yep. So they got in over the weekend and they're in the midst of it right now. Should be good.
Now, did any pets come with the house sitting assignment?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Yep. So I'm taking care of the dog and 2 cats here.
Nice. All right. One thing that has not changed on the podcast.
It's the hiking pole.
It's the hiking pole, and that's pole spelled with 2 L's, like a survey, not like the things you hold in your hands. And this is a 7-question survey. It's going to allow me to give you a rating on the sanity scale from 1 to 100, with 1 being completely insane and 100 being completely sane. As a calendar year triple crowner, there's an automatic 40-point deduction. So your top score is 60, top score possible.
I think that's totally fair.
Okay. Now, you've done this a couple of times. So I'm wondering if we should use the alternate set of questions.
Yeah, I've done 2 different versions of questions. I've done one that was hiking related questions and one that was not really hiking related.
So you've done
I've done a little bit of both. I think so. Yeah.
So where do we go then?
I don't know. Maybe you can mix and match a little bit, do some of both.
Okay. We'll see if any of your opinions changed on some of the hiking stuff after being out on the trail for so long. And then I'll throw in some other random questions from set B.
I think that's a good one, because I think when I did the hiking questions, I think it was before the calendar Triple Crown. I think that would have been like maybe April of 21 was when I did that. So actually, that's probably a good way to go.
Okay. All right, here we go. Question number 1 then. This is the first time that we have combined both sets of questions. So you're a trailblazer, a true trailblazer here on the podcast. Question number 1, let's talk about, after the calendar Triple Crown, let's talk about your ideas about your shelter system. Tent, tarp, hammock, bivy, or cowboy camping?
My favorite is, I think, cowboy camping. I really like the efficiency of that and the simplicity of it. But with that, I still wanted, I had a tarp ready all year last year to have sent to me, but I ended up carrying a tent the whole time. Anytime that I was about to switch to a tarp, there was some excuse that would come up of the first time I was about to get it. I was heading into Oregon on the PCT, and the mosquitoes were really bad. And so I hung on to the tent a little bit longer. And then there was always something. So I always had the tent ready. I used it a fair bit of the time, but I'd say overall, if it's possible, I go cowboy camp.
Okay. Very good. Now, what are the conditions that prevent you from cowboy camping?
Being iffy whatsoever about the forecast coming up. So I didn't really cowboy camp at all when I was out east last year. Did quite a bit out west. And then sometimes when it was colder, I could have cowboy camps, and I did some, but I was more prone to trying to get a few more degrees of heat when it was getting a little bit colder at the end of the season when I was out there, and would go for my tent.
Okay. Question number 2. We're going to pull from set B on this one. Let's see. Clowns, funny or scary?
Oh, man, I think I lean scary. I think I remember as a kid thinking that they were a little bit creepy. I didn't love anybody in a costume, like mascots and stuff. I was a little bit iffy about, even as a little kid. I was just very aware it was a person. It was a stranger that was running around. And yeah, especially the rap that clowns have gotten in the media and in like movies and stuff. I feel like you rarely see them as a funny thing anymore. So I think I'm team scary clowns.
Yeah, the whole serial murderer books and movies, documentaries have just ruined the whole clown experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's enough that it's almost like classically scary, even, I would say. It's not even that nuanced of a thing anymore. I think it just is mostly scary.
Yeah, do you remember 3 or 4 years ago, there was this whole rash of sightings across the country of like clowns standing on the side of the road?
I do remember that.
Creepy.
I feel like that was maybe more than 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe it happened a couple times, but I remember that was like a thing that was happening.
But when you get old, like me, 3 or 4 years ago, it could have been 10 years ago, but it seems 4 years ago. So you have to
I'm with you.
That. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, when it comes to food out there, did you change your mind? Are you stove guy, cold soak, or stoveless?
I went into the year last year of always having been a stove guy. And at the end of it, I'm still 100% a stove guy. I just, any time of year, no matter how many miles I hiked in a day, one of the things that would always get me through a day is a hot meal, whatever the temperature was outside. I liked having a meal that I knew I would enjoy. And it was always worth it for me to carry a stove.
Okay. Nice. You didn't get that crazy.
I didn't get too crazy.
Yeah. All right. Question number 4. I don't think we've asked this one before on the podcast. We'll give it a shot. Are introverts too quiet or are extroverts too loud?
Ooh, I think that's a good question. It might depend on even what time of day you ask me. I think right now I'm leaning towards introverts being too quiet, because I am an introvert, and I think usually introverts have a lot more to say than they do, and I think they usually have really profound things to say, but often leans towards not saying it. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that they don't say, but I think that they and we have a lot to say on things. And so I think the world would probably be a better place if we talked a little bit more.
Yeah, I was going to, as you were heading into that answer, I was going to ask you if you were consider yourself an introvert or extrovert. I have my own opinion. I had you categorized in the introvert category, even though you've been on my podcast 4 times now, and you're out there just doing tremendous things, but you seem a little on the quiet side sometimes.
Yeah. And I think specifically, I think I'm at my very best when I'm with exactly one other person. And so right in between the introvert, extrovert thing. But one other person is like the perfect social dynamic for me. I could do that for a long time. I start to get a little bit lonely when I'm by myself for a super long time, get overwhelmed when I'm around too many people. But one other person I can do. So that's why I keep showing up to just talk to you on your podcast.
That's a good point. How many people is too many people?
Yeah, I get worn out with.
Is it more than 2 other people? Is that too many?
Honestly, more than one other person. I start to think too much about all the different combinations and dynamics between people. With one person, I just have to worry about that. But even when there's 2 other people, I think about like how the other 2 people are doing with each other and trying to guide that conversation and everything. I like it. I like being around people. But one person I can be around forever. Multiple people, I start to need a little bit of space from.
Got it. All right. Question number 5. Back to the hiking questions. Is life better above or below the tree line?
I think I like it above the tree line. I like popping up and getting those views. It's such a treat. It's especially being someone that grew up on East Coast hiking. Like, it still feels like a novel thing to go out west and to pop out above it. And it's just the coolest thing in the world. And because I don't get to experience it as much, I think that I love the moments that I do get to be up above it.
Okay. Question number 6. Do you sleep with your socks on?
I do most of the time. Yeah.
In real life?
Oh, in real life, no. In real life, never. On trail, most of the time.
Okay. Yeah, people who sleep with their socks on in everyday, ordinary life, a red flag.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. On trail, I have no trouble doing it. I do it all the time. And like, especially after last year, like my circulation has gotten worse and worse over the years of hiking. And so my feet just take forever, even on like just moderately cool days. It takes forever for them to warm up at the end of the day. So whatever else I can do to keep my feet warm at night, I'll take. But in normal life, yeah, no way.
Okay. And question number 7. Let's see. Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
I'm massively into both, but I did listen to the entire Harry Potter series 4.5 times over the course of my hike last year. So big time both, bigger time Harry Potter.
Really? I thought just naturally a thru hiker would pick the original thru hike, which is Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I know. And it's deeply intertwined with my hiking. The first like really long backpacking trip I went on, I did a 3-week trip when I was in college, and I carried the Fellowship of the Ring with me and read it every night in my hammock on this college trip. And I loved it. So it is like deeply tied in with hiking for me specifically. But Harry Potter just like transcends that for me. I was like the perfect age to grow up with it. I got into them like right after the 4th book came out. So I was like, getting the books at midnight. I was there for that like really short blip of time where like kids were waiting at stores for books to come out and had that whole cultural experience and was like, like roughly the same age as the characters and really grew up with them. And so that was just like so deeply tied in with my childhood that it just barely beats out Lord of the Rings for me.
Yeah, you weren't around and neither was I when Lord of the Rings was released originally.
Yeah.
That was a while ago. Now, you listened to it 4.5 times. Best of the series, best book.
My favorite is maybe book 5 because it's the longest and it has the most in it that's not in the movies. And as someone that like watches the movies regularly and then doesn't read them as much, when I come back to read it, there's more to it that I've forgotten about. So it feels like there's more in it every time that I pick it back up because there's so much that's left out of that movie. And just because there's so much going on that I forget about. It feels like it has the most, it just does like objectively have the most content in it, but the most that I forget about. And so because of that, I think is my favorite, but I can make a case for any of them.
Now, I think Goblet of Fire is number 4. What's number 5?
5 is Order of the Phoenix.
Order of the Phoenix. That's right. That's right. Okay. And do you identify more with Harry, Ron, or Hagrid?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think, I don't know. I definitely see parts of myself in all of them. Yeah, it's really close between all of those. But maybe, I don't know. It's hard to commit to one of those. I don't know. I'll say Ron though, maybe just barely.
That's where I thought you were going to land with Ron. Nice. All right. Hey, your answers to those corollary questions, they didn't factor into the scoring of the hiking poll. But let me put your other answers through the algorithm here. Hiker Trash.
Okay, yeah. Crunch my numbers, Doc.
Got to crunch the numbers. Let's see. I've got to carry the 3. We're going to divide that by root 5. This is higher level math here. Going to multiply by pi. And then we're going to adjust for the thickness of the makeup on a clown standing on the corner in the neighborhood just outside your sister's house.
Yeah, you got to.
I sleep with the windows closed, please. I come up with a score of 43.
Okay. So 17 off. Perfect. I guess we'll take that.
Yeah. What was it last time? Do you remember?
I can't, but my rubric was different. I think my maximum possible score was a little higher at the time.
Yes. Calendar Triple Crown, automatic -40.
Yeah. Which again, totally fair.
Mm-hmm. All right. Hey, let's back up just a little bit for those new folks out there who are just tuning in and hearing about the Prof for the first time. Remind us, what's your background? Where'd you grow up and how'd you get involved in thru hiking?
Yeah, I grew up here around East Tennessee. And I got into the outdoors through summer camp. And outdoors just was like happened to be a part of summer camp for me when I grew up going to it. I was way more into it for the social component of it that I really liked and clicked with. And then I got into backpacking specifically in high school and was really intrigued by the gear. I just thought all the gear stuff was really cool. So I spent like a year or two collecting that. And then went on a trip with my dad after I graduated high school in 2011. We went and did a weekend trip in the Smokies. And I was just like really frustrated because I had such a difficult time doing 30 miles over 3 days that I thought like it was so hard and so painful that I didn't know if I'd ever backpack again. But went to college and went on like slower trips, got more of a kind of a beginner start into it. And I majored in wilderness leadership and experiential education again, hoping to go work and do summer camp kind of stuff, and then fell in love with the outdoor component of it a bit more, specifically the backpacking, and just found, that I really loved that experience. Like I mentioned earlier, I went on this 3-week trip that was part of the program I did in college. So I had a longer trip, an extended outing, and felt like I really got to know myself, and even more than myself, but others, and like seeing people really exposed to the elements, and just seeing that like, wow, this is the way to like really get to know somebody, of like pushing someone to their extremes a bit and seeing what happens and how people adapt to that. So loved that. Went and worked at a camp in Washington State after college, and got to do some backpacking there and leading some trips. Got to jump in and co-lead even some mountaineering kind of stuff. And then I had like kind of like a sort of classic way that people in like their, I don't know, mid-20s get into through hiking. Of I left my job, and on the same day that I left my job, my next job fell through. I moved out of my place where I was staying, and my girlfriend broke up with me all in the same day. So it was a heartbreak situation that got me onto trail, and that was December. And then I knew before the end of the breakup conversation just popped into my head of I'm going to go through hike the Appalachian Trail, and spent a few months getting ready for that. I had just saved up as if I was going to move to Seattle. So I had plenty of money for it. So all I needed was something to do for a little while. And so went out and through hiked the Appalachian Trail, and then have just been totally obsessed with through hiking ever since. And that has just been my total priority for the last 5 years now.
You've gone down the rabbit hole for sure.
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some things I want to unpack right there. But before I do, I want to comment on your appearance, because you're rocking a Jolly Gear shirt, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're a big proponent of Jolly stuff, I know.
Yeah. I'm a huge proponent. It's cool. We have a connection. So he reached out to me last year on my trip. The first week of January, he sent me a message and said he had heard about what I was doing, and he actually used to work at the same outdoor store that I'd worked at. He's now based out of Utah, but he's from Alabama. And we like maybe overlapped for the first week I was there in like 2018.
No way.
We both worked for the same company at different stores. We might have talked with each other on the phone, like ordering stuff for customers. We overlapped. We never like really met each other, but definitely crossed paths there. And he saw what I was doing and liked the connection and wanted to send me a shirt for the year. And so I got to be the first person to wear a Jolly shirt last year when they like really exploded and were everywhere on trail. And so he sent me a shirt, and then I wore it, and then I got to be the first person to do the full Triple Crown in one of his shirts. And then now I partner with him, and so we're buddies and have this really cool connection, and I love his stuff. Like I said, I got to wear one shirt last year, and I put about 8,000 miles on one of his shirts, and got to put the Triple Crown in the Triple Crown button down.
Nice. Yeah, Jolly Gear has just exploded. If you go on Instagram, it's in every other post. It is just everywhere right now.
Yeah, it really is. I found last year, I was a little bit worried that, I'm going to get out here, everyone's going to look exactly like me. It feels like it's proportionally higher on social media than it is on trail. I didn't feel like I saw as many as I thought I would, like per person, based on how big it was on social media. So it still feels like somewhat unique being in one out there. But that was the thing, is that they look like these like really cool, unique shirts. And then when everybody buys one, it becomes a little bit less unique. But they're, even looks aside, the functionality and the comfort of these, it's just, I love it.
Nice. And Jolly Gear is a sponsor of Hiker Trash Radio. We just did a combined merchandise giveaway live from Jackson, Wyoming a couple of weeks ago. It was a lot of fun. He gave away one of his caps and one of our shirts. And he's just an outstanding guy. He's been on the podcast, and just very cool what he's doing out there.
Yeah, I know. He's awesome. I listened to that episode. That's cool to hear him on there. I was just finishing up. Actually, it was maybe the same day that I saw you that I listened to his episode, when you and I met up in December when I was coming through over there. Yeah, and I just got to see him at Trail Days too. I hung out with him at the booth. When I was coming through last year, his parents hosted me in Alabama. And so I got to know his whole family last year as part of my hike. And so, it was like my main place to hang out at Trail Days last month was at the Jolly Gear booth. So I just got to hang out with him for a while.
You're an honorary fisher now.
Yeah, that's what his dad tells me.
And I do have to remark that you're relatively clean shaven from the last time I talked to you.
Yeah, I know. I've been keeping my beard clean at least lately. I'm letting my hair go a little bit right now. I'm starting to lose it just a little bit. It's starting to go gray, both of which I'm stoked about. Like I'm into it, but just like as like the last time that it'll look like this when I can grow it out, I'm just letting it go for a little bit.
Yeah. Did you ever see Castaway? with Tom Hanks?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yeah, you remember when he crashed? He's on the plane and he crashes on the island, and then it cuts away for 2 years or whatever it is, and comes back to him. You've got that kind of look to you.
Yeah, thanks, Doc.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, you're a true outdoorsman. You've got the look. You represent.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, I put in the miles for it.
Yep, that's right. You earned it. Now, you mentioned earlier about working with kids and getting to know people out there in the outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say kids or people? Just regular people?
I've worked with both. I might have said people. I can't remember what I said specifically, but
I don't want to misrepresent what you were doing, but you get to know people very quickly. And I think that's indicative or that's similar to being on the trail as well. Mm-hmm. You run into people out there, you talk to them, you intersect their lives for a very brief moment, but you seem to pick up a lot of information about people. There's a lot of sharing out there. I don't know if it's trauma bonding or what it is out there on the trail where you feel like you can share some of your most personal issues and secrets with relative strangers.
Yeah, totally. I think that's definitely true. And then I think there's also something about overcoming adversity with other people that is, I think that specifically, like getting through something difficult together with people, I think is one of the things that brings people together more than anything else, of going through something difficult together. Mm-hmm. And even just hiking a few miles on a trail, like that's usually what you're doing. Like you're like deep into a through hike, you're usually in some degree of pain and you're both just like trying to get through another day of it and enjoying it, but still it's never easy to be out there. And so even just that, of like the act of putting in a few more miles with another person, which is usually what you're doing when you meet people on trail, that in itself brings you together. And then usually the stuff that comes up that you talk about is usually fairly heavy stuff, or even if it's not heavy, it's at least very real. And you're talking about things that you're just in a headspace usually that you're thinking about things that are authentic and matter. And every day feels like there's something that matters about it. And yeah, and just going through that with other people, even if it's just for a few hours or even minutes, you can usually connect with people pretty deeply.
Mm-hmm. And I know your major in college was wilderness leadership. Mm-hmm. And did you take that major with an idea of getting a job in the outdoor industry somewhere, somehow?
Yeah, that was the hope. And that's what I did right out of college and going up to work at this camp in Washington. That was a year-round camp, did summer camp stuff in the summer and then hosted guest groups throughout the rest of the season, and then did outdoor education, like school groups came up. And so worked with all types of groups of people over the course of the year. And then my job specifically, the first summer or two I was there, was the offsite trips and going out and doing backpacking and climbing and paddling and mountaineering and everything with people. And yeah, it was a good, diverse job, doing a lot of stuff that I loved in a setting that I really loved.
Yeah, if someone's listening right now and they want to work in the outdoor industry somehow, that's their passion, what advice do you have for them? Nobody's really getting rich in the outdoor industry. Whether it's there's a lot of cottage industries that are small in size and scope. There are podcasts, there's other brand ambassadors, but very few people, I should say, are actually striking it rich. And that's probably not why you're in the industry anyway. You're not looking to get rich, but what advice might you have for somebody who is looking to try and make it in the outdoor world?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think that's not too much of a secret, of knowing that you're not going to make a ton of money doing it, but it typically is worth it. I don't know many people that do it that are, I don't know, usually you can make enough to get by, especially doing something that you love like that. I think it's surprising how big of connections that you make when you go out there and do something. That, like, you might go spend a summer being like a whitewater guide or something. A lot of these jobs you can go into without too much experience and just show up and plug in. And then the network is crazy. Like, you get in, you work some random camp somewhere, you'll meet people probably that'll be able to connect you with some other place. And so just getting a foot in the door and really wanting to do it, whatever it is that you get into, you'll find connections that will take you where you want to go if you stay in it long enough, I think. And so that's a big part. It's just like the networking of it all. Even, figuring that out, learning about other jobs. I got to Washington because I grew up going to the camp just down the street that my parents signed me up for as a kid. And then around the time I was ready to go to a different camp, my camp had just gotten a new program director that had come from this camp in Washington. And so then she hooked me up. So I had a connection. So it was easy and quick to get out there. And then, it just takes one connection to get you to somewhere cool like that or somewhere different. And just like hop in and enjoy the ride.
And what is your next gig? Have your connections led you somewhere new and exciting?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. I heard in passing from a girl I dated a long time ago about this gig in Alaska and processing salmon. And it had just always stuck in my mind a little bit. She'd just come out of this when we had started dating, and I just heard a little bit about it. It's quick, easy money. It's not easy. It's quick money in the sense that like you go up and you work really hard and walk away with a good paycheck, but you just show up. You don't really need any skill set other than just endurance of making it through long days. And it's 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, the whole time that you're up there. And I just got on Indeed and applied to the first thing that came up. I just barely put any information about myself, and it was enough to get an interview. And then I guess I did well in an interview and then got this job. And it's as long as I make it the whole time, which people do get sick and don't make it because it's such intense work. But the round trip flight is covered, and then room and board is covered the entire time. So it really is, all I have to do is show up and plug in, and then you work 112 hours a week. And so 72 of those hours are overtime or getting time and a half. And so you just show up and you work like crazy. My season is only going to be about 4 weeks, so it's not even that crazy of a season, but at what they pay, just doing crazy work like that, and I'll be able to have enough that I won't have to work again for a little while.
Now, Prof, if you are applying for an endurance type job, do you just prepare your resume and just have 4 letters on your resume? It just says CYTC. You hand that into them. And the interview, you just say, hey, look, I just did the calendar year Triple Crown. You're hired on the spot.
Yeah, honestly, I think that I expanded on it, not knowing if they knew exactly what all that stuff was, but just mentioned that like I just come off an entire year of backpacking and hiking like 14 to 16 hour days pretty regularly. That was the perfect fit for this. And so that's just a note of, depending on what you're looking to do and how you spin it, a through hiking resume can take you places.
What was their reaction when you told them that?
I think that maybe normally they try to scare people a little bit of like how intense the work is. And when I mentioned that, I don't think that they went into that too much and accepted that, I would probably be up for the gig.
They didn't scare you. You scared them.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the calendar Triple Crown again. I want to hear about your reflections now that we're 6 months out on it. See what else you have soaked up from that experience. And I also want to talk to you about what you've been up to since the last time we talked. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We are talking to Carl Stanfield, aka Prof. And the last time we talked, it was with a number of people. I believe we had Jeff Garmeyer as a co-host, and we had the 4 calendar year Triple Crowners, one of whom was you. And it was a good time talking about your experiences out there. But what I'd like to talk about tonight a little bit is here we are. This interview is taking place at the end of June. So we are a good full 6 months out from your completion of the calendar year Triple Crown. Maybe just take us through, maybe for our listeners who aren't familiar with the concept, just a brief explanation of what is the calendar Triple Crown. What was your approach to it? What sequence did you do? And then let's really focus on, with 6 months time between the finish and this interview, what are some of the takeaways? What else have you learned about the experience? What else have you learned about yourself? I think it's a pretty broad plateau we could spend a little bit of time on.
Cool. Yeah. A lot of stuff to talk about in there. So first of all, the calendar year Triple Crown is the Triple Crown of hiking: Appalachian Trail, Continental Divide Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, done in a calendar year. And so I did an extension of that. The CDT and the PCT both already go border to border. And then I extended the Appalachian Trail, started in Key West, and went along the greater route of the Eastern Continental Trail, which includes the entirety of the Appalachian Trail, and then extended that from the southernmost point of the U.S. up into Canada. And initially, I was going for a world record and trying to backpack more miles in the calendar year than had ever been done before. I didn't quite get that goal. I ended up falling short of that a bit in October. I've just had too many miles to go. I was initially going to tack on a 4th trail after all that, and had too many miles left to do. My body was too beat up. And so slowed down at the end of the year last year and finished up the Pacific Crest Trail. I still had about 700 miles of that left to go when I called it on the greater record, but still did become, I believe, the first person to go border to border on all 3 in a calendar year. In total, it was 8,451 miles last year from January 1st to December 18th.
That is a good stretch of the year. There's not much time for anything else.
Yeah, and my miles dropped pretty significantly at the end there. But initially I did the first 4,000 miles in just over 5 months. Got to Canada on June 7th, and then ended up needing to take a break. The AT just really beat me up, and then the northern end. So spent about 10 days recovering, and then went out and hopped on at the southern ends of the Sierra stretch of the PCT. So skipped the desert initially. I was hoping to get out there in late May, and was about a week late on that, and then wanted a break. So took a little bit of rest for that, which is part of what set me behind ultimately. But yeah, hopped in at Kennedy Meadows South, and then hiked about 2,000 miles of the PCT before coming over in the middle of August to head south on the CDT. And then you and I had a chat then. I was at the first hostel there on the CDT at Aluna's place when you and I got to chat a little bit. So that's the last time that it was just the two of us talking, that I got to give a little bit update on how things were going. So then from then I hiked about 2,000 miles on the CDT to finish that up, and then headed over. And so around Halloween is when I ended up calling it on the record, and then slowed down to finish up, and took another 10-day stretch to just lay flat in a hotel before really getting back at it on the PCT, and then finished up that in the middle of December. So that's an overview of what the timeline looked like for me.
And you mentioned that after the AT, you were pretty beat up. And I think if people aren't real familiar with the trails, if they just have a kind of a 30,000 foot perspective of the trails, they might wonder, why is the AT so difficult? It doesn't have a mountain range like the Winds or the Rockies or the San Juans. It doesn't have the Sierras. There's nothing terribly tall on the AT. What makes that trail beat people up so badly?
Yeah, it's the sadistic trail makers, people that they forged that trail initially, that especially New Hampshire and Maine, that things are just ridiculously steep all the time. And it's interesting, it doesn't take too much. Like the PCT is entirely graded for pack animal travel, and just that grade is the difference. That my knees were really giving me a lot of trouble on the AT. And then, yeah, like really hurting, really moving slow a lot of the time, coming downhill. Uphills were okay. There's a lot of scrambling, using both your hands a lot of the time to get up things. But it was the downhills that really beat me up. And then heading back out west, I didn't really have much of an issue with it anymore. It just, whatever that difference is of how much I'm having to bend my knees on each step, was just enough of a difference that it made a big difference for me. And it is pretty severe, of just steep hiking on rocks. And then I was out there early enough in the season that there was snow and ice on that too. So it was just a little bit slower than it already normally would be. On some stretches, it honestly wasn't too bad, but the only time I needed my micro spikes the entirety of last year was when I was in New Hampshire and Maine. It was a really good snow year last year in the Sierra. And so I didn't even need spikes when I was out there. I think I carried them with me, but I ended up never needing them. And yeah, so that was slow, steep going, finishing up the AT.
Congratulations on the accomplishment, the calendar year Triple Crown. Congratulations on being the first person to do border to border 3 times in that accomplishment. And I guess, is that an FKT? If you're the only person to do it.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it'd also be an OKT.
OKT.
Yeah, the only known time, right?
There you go. OKT. Now, what have you gained any additional perspective in the 6 months that have gone by since?
Yeah, I think something I'm struggling with at the end of the year and then into a lot of this year is just how to accept and learn from and be proud of what you take from failure. In that it's such a mixed bag of this really cool success of getting to do something, but also I spent an entire year going for this record and then didn't get that. And so I objectively did fail at that world record that I was going for. And yeah, just grappling with that and still having space to let myself be proud of what I did do and not focusing on the negative. And I still had a pretty big year of backpacking. And then all of that aside too, of just one of my biggest goals last year was to get to spend an entire year backpacking. And whatever I did, whatever technicality I did of, maybe I road walked too much, and so it didn't technically count that I hiked the Continental Divide Trail. And there was this fire closure that I tried twice to get around in Oregon on the PCT and technically had to leave a gap. And so maybe I didn't actually complete that. So just those little things of just like swallowing my pride with that. And yeah, being able to accept the imperfections and not dwelling on that, and still, yeah, just figuring out the humility within all of that, of being humble about the things that didn't go well, but still being proud of myself for the things that did.
Now, in hindsight, when you set off on this mission in January, did you publish the whole idea that, When I say publish, did you vocalize, did you post somewhere that you were going to try and set the record for most miles hiked in a year?
Yeah, that was my big thing. I wrote an article for the Trek in March of 21. So 9 months before I headed out, I announced it there. And I did something to get your attention. You were the first person to reach out that wanted to talk to me on a podcast or anything. And so I mentioned that I wanted to do it then. And so it feels good to have gone from just being this crazy person that wants to try this big thing. Because I've heard of plenty of people that have tried really big things and not gotten too far in it. And I still technically am one of those people that didn't go all the way in the thing that I wanted to, but still came pretty far in it and still made a pretty decent name for myself last year on the trail. That was, beyond what I could have hoped for. And the community around was really gracious and uplifting about everything. There's just so much positivity around my entire experience, and getting to see people in person, people reaching out online, all of that was nothing but positive all the time, which was really cool. And another big part of what I wanted to do from being out there is to get further invested in the thru hiking community, and definitely felt like I got that with all the people that I met. With as much time as I spent on trail, I met thru hikers on all 3 of the big trails last year. I feel like I'm 1 or 2 degrees separated from everyone that's ever thru hiked a long trail at this point.
Now, Prof, I asked this question only because you expressed how bittersweet it is that you have this great accomplishment of doing the Calendar Triple Crown, doing border to border 3 times, spending an entire year hiking out there, but there's still this bit gnawing at you about not having set the record for most miles hiked in a year. So if you had to do it over again, would it maybe be a better approach to not publish that idea, that concept that you're going to try and break the record? That way, if you fell short, the only person who knows you fell short is you. Would you have done it differently, do you think, if you had to do it over again?
Not in that sense, I don't think. I think that was a healthy amount of pressure throughout the year. And I think also helped to get some of the attention that I got in a helpful way of people wanted to be involved and people wanted to help. People wanted to host me and bring me food and all of these things. And so that was really cool. And that's something that helped me going for as long as I did too, was that it felt like I was doing it for just beyond myself. These people wanted to help me, people that didn't know me at all. And I look like a nice person on social media, but I think really what a lot of like strangers wanted to be involved with me for was getting to be a part of something big, that they wanted to see this person succeed and get to say, hey, I helped that happen. And so that was something that helped me last year, was feeling when I was like having tough days or hurting or whatever it was, that it felt like the thing that I could do to give back to those people was do something big that they can say that they got to be a part of. And so that still got to be something big. And so I still feel like I did those people justice. But I think it was a healthy amount of pressure in that I did eventually call it. I didn't put so much pressure on myself that I was out there till I broke something and physically went down. I was able to adjust that and had a proportional amount of pressure and personal disappointment in that. But the community was nothing but supportive that entire time. And it was such a fun bit of the whole experience to get to play like trail celebrity a little bit for the year, and to get recognized on trail, and for people to know who I was and to be excited and want to talk with me. And that was a big part of it too, was aside from just a moment of being recognized, it made social interactions. Like people saw me and knew who I was, and I didn't have to introduce myself and talk about what I was doing at all. They knew what was going on with me. And so I could go ahead and start talking about what was going on at a deeper level instead of having to catch people up of what was going on. That people were like invested pretty quickly. And then I got to talk about them, and they knew enough about me, but I got to know other people. And so I think the best way to put it is it made social interactions efficient. And so I got to get the most out of a lot of those.
I thought you were going to say that as an introvert, it helped you and that you didn't have to do a whole lot of talking because you were in a hurry.
Yeah, part of that too. I didn't have to say the same old basic stuff over and over again so many times, that people got the gist of it. I got to talk about like how it was actually going, and got to know a lot of people really well last year.
Prof, the only person beating you up over not setting the world record is you. So don't be too hard on yourself. Still quite an accomplishment. You have accomplished what it's less than 1% of 1% of 1% of the world's population. It's some absurd number. You are one of a very few that has done this. So congratulations again.
Yeah. Thanks, Doc. I think, it was great. I had a great year. I definitely had a lot of determination to get through it, but also just a lot of things went right for me last year. And I think that's a big thing in thru hiking in general, to do any trail. I don't think that you need to specifically be lucky. I don't think anything extra has to go right for you, but I think you need to avoid bad luck. And so I didn't have too many bad things happen to me. And so that in itself is its own good luck, but it's not like extra good things need to happen on a normal through hike. Maybe they did for me a little bit in that like I had so many excellent weather windows. Like it was a great snow year in the Sierra. I got there late enough in the season coming through in the CDT that snow didn't mess with me too much there. I was really fortunate in a lot of ways and had a lot of things go really well for me. And so I did my part, and then everything else that was around me went well for me too. And that really helped to make it happen.
Yeah, all it takes is one twisted ankle to take you off the trail for an extended period of time. And not only do you not get to finish your Triple Crown, but you don't get to finish your maybe even your hike, your regular hike.
Yeah, exactly. And so in that way, in avoiding a lot of bad luck last year, I think I was really fortunate.
Yeah. And since you finished, what else has being a calendar year Triple Crowner, has that opened other doors for you? Have you additional sponsorships, additional publicity, articles? What's been going on?
Yeah, I think so. So I've had some speaking opportunities come up. So I got to speak at Trail Days. I was invited to go and do that and talk there at the AT Trail Days, which was a lot of fun. Other sponsorships have popped up. My relationship with Jolly Gear has gotten really good. He took a real risk on me in sending me something, and I represented that well enough to get to continue to be a partner and a friend with him. So that's really cool. So there's some other things that are in the works there. And then I really like being really invested in the community, that in addition to actually like getting things from it, like sponsorships and all that kind of stuff, that it was a nice reminder going back to Trail Days, because I got off the trail in December and initially had a lot of people like reach out to me on social media to congratulate me, but then everything's just really quiet. Like I finished the year last year and it was bizarre. Like I flew out on New Year's Eve of 21. So I left and everything was decorated for Christmas. And then an entire year of hiking goes by, and then I show back up and then everything's still decorated for Christmas. So like this weird blip where I left and came back, and there's no one that I was really hiking with that was there last year. And it like felt like nothing had happened a little bit. It's just strange, especially after getting used to like seeing hikers so often and being recognized on trail, of coming back to just being like an average Joe, of just this bum that's living at my sister's house. Just I called myself a stay-at-home brother for a while. That's a lot of what I did, was just hang out and do chores around the house for a while and get to stay here and recuperate a bit. It was
stay-at-home brother. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was really fun going to Trail Days and still getting to see like months later of still people excited to see me and congratulating me, and the networking piece being there, of going up and talking to vendors that were familiar with what I'd been up to last year, and just having all those connections. That it feels like in some way there's a lot of pressure to feel like I needed to do something right away, of grow an online presence or go ahead and announce I'm doing something else. And so there's a little bit of stress in just being still a bit this year, but going out there at Trail Days was really encouraging. Oh yeah, like this was a big enough thing that I think a lot of these connections and friendships and everything will last beyond just this quick minute of notoriety and what I did last year. And of course, still wanting to go out and hike and do more long hikes and all this kind of stuff. It's been a bit of a quiet year, but that doesn't mean that there's not more things coming for sure.
Prof, tell me there's a screenplay in the works.
Not that I'm aware of. If it is in the works, then it's up to someone beyond me.
And they are missing out. This is a story that needs to be told. Now, who would play you in the movie?
Oh man, I don't know. I think there's one guy that I like that I think he's a little bit shorter than I am, but I think would be good. There's this actor named Evan Peters that I think looks a little bit like me when either I'm shaved down or when he's harried up.
I can see it. He played Dahmer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's no commentary
on
you. That's no commentary on you, Prof. Evan Peters. We need to reach out to him. We need to tell him the story and get him excited about this. We'll get something going. Yeah, great. I'll let your PR people take care of that, Doc. Now, I know I've talked to people that have hiked just one long trail, PCT, the AT, CDT, and we've talked about post-trail depression. Is it magnified coming off of a calendar Triple Crown and spending 12 months out there? Is it worse than ever? Yeah. Short answer, yes. Yeah, I think so. I think especially what I mentioned of it was nice of being recognized and feeling like a lot of people were behind me in this cause and everything.
And then both not being surrounded by those people and then also having the cause go away. Like you experience that on a normal hike of spending like 4, 5, 6, maybe more months heading towards something. And then that just naturally, when you're not heading towards a goal like that anymore, that it can be a bit deflating. And so spending multiple years really, because I announced it and spent most of 21 telling everybody about this and building up buy-in from all the people in my community of this thing I'm going to do. And then spending a year doing it, of that being over. And then not really having a plan in place or another big thing to tackle intentionally, of wanting to not feel like just because I've done one big thing that I have to keep topping that, of intentionally having space there. That's difficult. And then it also isn't as much fun to do nothing as I dreamt that it would be. Like all of last year, all I wanted to do was just lay around and not do much, and like maybe play some video games and watch some movies, catch up on shows, all of that, eat whatever I wanted and just hang out. That the luster of that didn't last for as long as I did it. And that was another interesting thing that was a result of last year, was the weight gain at the end of the hike for me. My metabolism was just way out of whack by the end of the year. And so I mentioned that I took 10 days off and slowed down when I was at the end of the year. And I wasn't eating crazy calories. I'd say I was like between 3,500 and 4,000 calories a day in sustaining the pace I was going on for most of the year. So then when I got to the desert of the PCT, I took 10 days off initially. I just laid in a hotel room, ate whatever I wanted for a while. And I got back on trail and I was really stiff when I got back on. I was moving slower than ever. And I was taking regular zeros, but when I was hiking, the days that I was hiking, I was doing usually 20 to 25 miles. And over the course of the last 7 weeks of my hike, I gained 25 pounds while still hiking. And so I put on a lot of weight while I was on trail and still hiking. And then I came home on December 18th. And then by New Year's, I had gained another 15 pounds. So over the course of about 2 months, I'd gained 40 pounds and I had been hiking for most of that time. So it wasn't like I got to come home and then was like really fit for a little bit, got to enjoy that and then eat whatever I wanted. I like immediately felt like I needed to do something about how much weight I'd gained. And I didn't feel like I started in great shape when I started January 1st in 22, but I was heavier set by January 1st of 23 than I was when I set out in 22. And just my metabolism being out of whack. I'd never experienced anything like that. Normally you do gain weight after a hike, but I gained 40 pounds in 2 months and I was hiking for most of that time. So that was also part of it, of a really not fun part of being pretty beat up, not being able to move much. I ran the slowest 5K of my life on January 1st of this year. And that normally I run to stay in shape, but my joints and everything were still in a lot of pain. So that didn't really happen very much. And so that definitely added to the post-trail depression experience of being in not great shape immediately and not being able to do much about it either, because I still need to recover.
Any suggestions or advice to folks out there who are just getting off the trail or will soon be getting off the trail and dealing with post-trail depression? What are some tips or tricks to overcome that and snap out of it?
Yeah, I think it definitely helps to stay busy to some degree, whatever that is. I think it really helps to stay connected to people, just like talking to your friends from the trail, and just like community is good. And also having someone to be able to relate to, because I think that's usually one of the most difficult parts, is that people are excited that you did this thing, but don't really realize the impact that it's had on you. And it's just harder to relate to people in general, of you having lived this thing and chosen this experience, and then other people don't and can't relate to that as much. So being able to stay connected to people that can relate to that, I think, is really important and really helpful in that. And then staying some kind of active, if it's physically active, if it's like just being involved in the community, if it's getting like some kind of like even like part-time work right away, of just something to stay busy, have something to work for. I think having another big goal is probably big and helpful, of having something else to be working towards, even if you're not doing much, but just having something to chip away at a little bit. Because I think that's really satisfying for the mind in a thru hike, of seeing tangible progress every single day towards this thing, of having something to replace that with, even if it's not as big of whatever the next thing is, to be able to chip away in your personal life. Okay,
that makes sense. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times that this has been a pretty quiet year, but I know that you have had some trail activities. What have you been up to this year?
Yeah, I've been on a couple of day hikes. I went out, a friend that I made that on the Continental Divide Trail, that came out and did trail magic for me. Someone that, just a random person from Instagram that saw my hike and saw me on the side of the road, actually, when I was road walking into Leadville in Colorado, stopped and gave me trail magic and ended up hiking with me a little bit. came out and did like a day hike with me. And I told her she was coming out to do the AT this year. And I said I'd help her out when she came out here. So I went and did like a 5-day stretch with her and got to do just a section hike. And that was cool, getting to plug in and be on the AT again. And then I got invited by another one of your former guests in Horsepower to go and do a through hike. So he and his buddy Constantine, have you spoken with Constantine?
I have, yes, both of
Okay,
them.
okay,
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I wasn't sure I knew I'd listened to Constantine before, but not on your podcast. Okay, cool. Yeah, so both those guys, Horsepower put that together because he met Constantine in 22. They did, I think maybe the Bigfoot Trail together. I think that's right. Anyways, yeah, they invited me and we went out and did the Sheltowee Trace Trail together in Kentucky. So we spent a couple weeks doing about 340 miles. I was still not totally recovered, so it wasn't total. We were doing 20, 25 miles a day most days, so slower than I'd been used to. And the trail was, I would say, easier, better grade than anything that I did last year, with the exception of Florida. That it was a pretty simple trail and very manageable miles. It was enough that I was pushing for sure. We didn't have a ton of extra time, but it was a lot more comfortable than what I had done the year before. And getting to do it with other people and planning with other people, planning to be with him the whole time. We ended up staying in town a lot more than we thought that we would. The community was awesome. Again, last year, like people reached out and wanted to help us. Like people were really proud of their home state of Kentucky and wanting to help us out. And so we got a lot of great trail magic from that experience. We were the first people to get to stay at this really great hostel. And we had a great time. Weather was great. It was a little bit chilly still. And it was awesome just getting to be out there with some other guys that had also done a lot of miles. Like of the three of us, Horsepower and I are pretty close in the amount of miles that we've done over our backpacking careers. But Constantine's getting good. Horsepower and I each have about 15,000, and Constantine somewhere between 25 and 30,000 lifetime miles, and has done all the national scenic trails and just done a ton of backpacking. So it was cool to be humbled in that way of like being used to the person hiking with other people that I am doing this big thing on and have done a lot of miles, and then being around other people that have done as many or more than I have and have even more trail experience than I do was, that was great. And then there was something too of it, like that none of us really cared about that so much. And it was just a really good dynamic between the three of us of just kind of, we all know the plan. We all know how this goes. Let's just go out and do it and have a good time.
You answer all my questions before I have a chance to ask them. That's a very comprehensive report on that. Horsepower, Constantine, and Prof out on the Sheltowee Trace Trail, 3 rock stars of the through hiking community. Did people you ran into, did they realize who they got to meet and spend some time with out there?
No, I don't think anybody that we actually met, but there were like a couple people that had followed one of the three of us on social media, usually knew the others of us, and were excited to come out and bring us trail magic or see us or whatever that was.
And so what were the topics of conversation out there on the trail between the three of you? Just if we were a mosquito, not a fly on the wall, but a mosquito on the wall, on the tent wall, what kinds of conversations would we have heard between the three of you?
Oh, yeah. Plenty of good hiking stuff. Actually, it would have been, good, probably podcast material for people like listening to hiking talk. We just talked about everything we could of like, we listed like our favorite and least favorite states we've ever hiked through. And like some of us had very strong opinions about that. And Horsepower is a really big college football guy. And I am too, actually. So we got to talk about just like sports some and like non-hiking related things. We talked about, some of our differences in hiking styles. And just like through social media, we got a lot of nights in town, a lot more than like the other guys were used to. And one of the big jokes was just the difference between mine and Horsepower's County or Triple Crowns. He started the AT in January, and it was his first long hike like that. And he was just miserable in the cold. And I had such good weather on the AT. So the joke was weather was always perfect for me, and it was always the worst possible for him. So we talk about what was going on. We were at certain places on trail, and he would describe just like this total like frozen hellscape that he went through. And I would talk about, I think it was 70 degrees that day for me. I didn't see any rain. And just like stuff like that came up. But it was a really good time. It was just fun talking with other people like that and being able to reach for some of the really niche experiences that we'd had and share with each other.
I'm gonna have to reach out to the other two guys and set up we're trying to recreate some of those conversations. We'll have to have all three of you on the same episode and do a little reunion show. Yeah,
that'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. And it was cool too, because I had met Horsepower in passing. He messaged me a lot last year. He was actually really helpful. But we met, he was doing a ton of shorter hikes last year, and he was doing the Pacific Northwest Trail. And we had talked a little bit, and he said he was going to leave a beer for me where it intersects or parallels the PCT. They parallel for, I don't know, like maybe somewhere between 8 and 11 miles, I think, like a pretty short stretch overall. And it was my last day on the PCT, so I was finishing up. And I was walking by and I heard someone call my name, and I looked over, and I passed by his tent in the morning and went up, and he got to hand me this beer personally that he was going to stash for me somewhere. And on that section of the PCT, you don't have service for a while. So we hadn't talked in a while. It had been weeks since he said he was going to do that even. And I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to find it. But we actually physically crossed paths in person the day that I got to the northern terminus of the PCT. So we talked for 15 minutes, and then I hustled to go finish up. So I'd only seen him in person once like that, and had never met Constantine before. And really barely knew these guys, but just trusted like these are hikers, that it's going to be a good time. And so we did. We had a great time all together. It was a really good dynamic between the three of us.
Fantastic. Now, anything else interesting happen during these 6 months?
Trail days was a lot of fun.
Any sparks of romance anywhere?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that is a really big thing, is that I have been really seriously talking to somebody that I met through Instagram that followed my hike last year and reached out to me earlier in the year this year, that we've been talking very seriously and are moving in a really serious direction. And so I'm hoping to add someone else to get to go on these through hikes with me in the future.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very excited about it.
It wasn't like stalkerish or anything, was it?
Oh, no, not at
all. All right. I know you're heading up to Alaska to process some fish and make some money, but what's the next big adventure after that for Carl?
Yeah. So I'm going up there for a month. And then after that, I'm actually going to join Natasha, is her name. And she lives in Canada, and she works at a camp similar to the one that I used to work at. So my plan is to go up and join her there for a month. And then she has a photography gig in Japan in September that I'm planning on going with her to. And she's doing this guided trip up Mount Fuji that I'm going to go get to do with her. And so not a backpacking trip coming up, but I'm going to go to Japan and hike Mount Fuji in September.
Wow. That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Professor, you know where we are right now?
I don't, Doc. Why don't you tell me?
Hiking hacks.
Formerly the Pro Tip Insight of the Week, now Hiking Hacks. This is where Prof gets to share some trail wisdom with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better. I know you've been holding something in reserve for us. What do you have?
Yeah, I think, man, I can't remember what advice I have and haven't given on this show yet. But now that it's a different name, whatever I give will be the first time I've given it on Hiker Trash Radio.
That's right.
And so I think my biggest piece of advice is that you shouldn't listen to most of the advice that you get. I think, especially on the long trails, especially early on in the long trails, a lot of people are really excited to pass on whatever wisdom it is that they think that they have. And I think often the more excited someone is to pass on what they think is wisdom, I think usually the less helpful that it is. So especially as a new through hiker, someone that's new to it, I think there can be a lot more trust in your gut and your own experience. However little that is, I think it typically goes a lot further than whatever it is people have to say. And I also find that there's very little that's actually universal. I've heard like very traveled hikers that have a lot of experience say things that they express as universally true that I don't think is necessarily universally true, or that may not be true for myself. I'm sure I've done the same. And so I think that, getting into it, I think it can be intimidating with as much as people say, oh, this thing is this way, and like when you do this, you have to do that. I think that's not necessarily always true. And so I think the most powerful thing is a person's personal experience. And so the takeaway from that is, I think, don't let other people's advice shake you. I think that there's a lot to glean from what other people have to say and from their experience, but that it's not necessarily always the gospel truth.
Now I'm intrigued. You've got me curious. Do you have an example of what people really posture as a universal truth out there on the trails that you think, maybe that's not correct? Maybe it's not true for everybody.
I think maybe, I can't think of any like super specific examples at the moment. I know I've definitely heard of some, but just people's like relationships, like with food, of like, you definitely need to eat calories this way. And I've heard like really strongly of like people that I like really respect and appreciate saying that like calories, like it doesn't matter what the food is, like just eat whatever calories you can. That works just fine. And this is like definitely the case. Some people say you definitely have to eat like this much protein. You're going to wear your body down. And just, I don't know. I think the truth is like somewhere in between those things. There's just a lot of, just plenty of stuff like that. I have heard people have really strong opinions on, and heard in some cases, like heard really good cases for both of them, and then have experienced something that's somewhere in the middle of those. And I feel like I've got enough miles under my feet now that I can say that I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Okay, fair point. So there you have it. We are just about done here. Hope our listeners enjoyed our time with Prof. I want to thank him for joining us this week. Prof, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they find updates on your latest adventures?
Yeah, so I just stick to Instagram. And so on Instagram, I am Prof_Carl, PROF_CARL.
Okay. Remember to check out the pod on social media as well. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you have comments or clips you want to share with me, you can send it to me at hikertrashradio@gmail.com.
Off the beaten path.
Now, unfortunately, we can't always be on the trail unless you're like Prof and you could be out there from January to December. But for the rest of us, when we're not on the trail, we need to find a way to get our adventure fix. And if they're not making a documentary about Carl's Calendar Year Triple Crown, I'm going to have to ask Carl to give us some suggestions, some recommendations for some outdoor adventure media for our listeners to help them get by. So this can be a book, a movie, documentary. We call this segment Off the Beaten Path. What do you have for us, Prof?
Yeah, I will say I'm looking forward to, I hope I'm not stealing the thunder too much from my good buddy Horsepower, but he's been working on a book of his adventures. And so that's dropping sometime. I don't know when he's going to get to that, but he's deep into it. So you can read about his adventures. I'm working on the same for myself. That's really far out. I watched a show recently that was really good, that I really enjoyed. That was like, just like one of those adventure race shows. It's called Race to Survive Alaska. It was pretty interesting. It just finished up their first season. It's this adventure race that I've seen old people have sponsored. ULA sponsored some of the hikers. Enlightened Equipment did. Sawyer. It's just the first adventure race show like that where I've seen there's a lot more crossover with through hiking and backpacking kind of stuff. That was pretty interesting. Just, nothing like big serious of anyone doing any crazy cool thing, but an adventure backpacking kind of show that I thought was pretty cool.
I've seen it advertised. I'll have to check that out now with your recommendation. And also, I need to get on the advanced list for those books by you and by Horsepower. Definitely interested in checking those out.
Yeah, I know. That'll be cool. I'm excited to read more about his thing. I haven't talked with him some, and then just, I think he's a great writer from what I've seen just on the way that he posts on social media. I'm excited to read more about his stuff when he gets to it.
All right.
Have we not asked you?
And before we wrap things up, just one more segment for you called What Have I Not Asked You That You're Dying to Tell Us About? What do we miss tonight?
Oh, man. Great question. I never feel like I have a great answer for. So I guess maybe it's a follow-up that I think the first time you asked me this, I told a story about this hiker that I had met on my very first thru hike, whose name was Pa, who, long story short, he was this hiker who was fascinating. I met him in the first week of my AT experience. And he had he told me his soulmate in his life was this Great Dane named Anna, and she passed away, and he was really devastated by her passing. And to commemorate her, he had her cremated and had her ashes put into a silicone pouch that was the exact shape of her paw and had that subdermally implanted into his sternum, which was one of the craziest stories I've ever heard to date. As I met him, his shirt was off and he pointed to it and I saw it, and he definitely had a Great Dane sized paw in his sternum. So my shout out the first time, maybe the question that I asked you to ask me was like one of the most interesting people I've met or something. And so I asked if anyone's ever seen him to send me a picture. My greatest regret in any of my hiking experiences, as much as I've talked about this guy, is not having a picture of him. One of my trail angels that I met last year let me know that he is back on the AT this year and sent me a picture of him. And so he is out. I don't have a great picture of him, but I've seen him. People have known and talked about Pa. So he's out there. Anybody that's hiking the AT this year, keep an eye out for this guy. He's super friendly. Like, I really liked him a lot, but just had the most fascinating like body modification I've ever seen. So I don't know what the question is there that I would want you to ask me about it, but that is my follow-up to the first time that you asked me this question, that there like something has come of it.
That is incredible. Fantastic. All right. Hey, we are finished. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Prof. I want to wish you the very best in your upcoming Alaska adventures, as well as Mount Fuji. and we hope you'll come back and talk with us on a later episode, especially with Horsepower and Constantine. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd love to. Anytime. I'm always happy to get to chat. I know I'm pretty far behind, but I'm coming after Ginger Ball's record for being on here so many times. Always happy to come back.
You are closing in on him. And as we close up today, any shout outs to friends and family, Carl?
I don't think anyone in particular. My family for being so supportive of me last year. My sister for being awesome and supporting me, mailing me packages all year. And just congratulations to her and to Grace and to Malcolm and them on their honeymoon. And then just everybody that I met last year, all these people that I got to hike so much with, all the trail angels that helped me out. And just, hope to see everybody again soon on some trail or some road trip. My favorite part about this whole thing is the community. So I wouldn't enjoy this so much without all the people that make it what it is. All
right. Hey, thank you for tuning in. Always remember, the trail is the trail. Doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. The trail is the trail. Embrace the suck.